Greetings all, and welcome to this ELISA Confab. My name is Kimoy Libert Chow. I'm one of the Advisory Council members. So I'm very excited to welcome you to this confab and to welcome Delila Kidanu as well. And so I hope you are just as thrilled as I am and ready to engage. So before we jump into Delila's remarks, just a few housekeeping logistics. So after her presentation, we will have about 10 minutes of Q&A. So please raise your hand or pose your questions in the chat. Then we will join a breakout room for about 20 minutes, and we invite you to interact, appoint a moderator, introduce yourselves, and share your interest in entrepreneurship in Africa. And in the context of today's session, discuss, what are some challenges entrepreneurs are facing and how best we can address them. And also, what insight did you gain from the speaker's remarks? And then when that breakout room is completed, we will then resume in the main session to close out this confab. So now it is my complete honor to introduce Delila. And just for a background, Delila has an impressive portfolio of experiences driving change and impacting lives. Her pathway steered her to ThinkYoung, which is a youth-focused think tank, where she worked as the external relations manager, developing social responsibility programs and managing corporate partners such as Boeing, Google, and Goodyear. She also managed her own consultancy focused on corporate social responsibility and market expansion projects for various organizations such as Bitpesa, ThinkYoung, Boeing, and Yusudi. Delila also led business development and partnerships at MEST Africa, engaging investors and partners to boost the Pan-African tech ecosystem through the development and scaling of African technology startups. Currently, this innovator is the co-founder and COO of KOA, a goal-based savings app based in Nairobi, Kenya. So, Delila, I invite you to share your story with us, your professional journey, and definitely more about this exciting venture, KOA, and your drive for entrepreneurship in Africa.
Perfect. Firstly, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Kimoy, for a great introduction. I am very excited to be here and also to be able to learn from everyone. I'm trying to have a full screen so I can see everyone's faces. So as Kimoy already said, my name is Delila Kidanu. I'm originally from Ethiopia, but have grown up in the southern, kind of on the continent, in the southern Sahara area for my whole life. I started off graduating university in Kenya, and actually a lot of people don't know this, but I started my first venture there. So we started a bridge building company, if you could say that. We raised funds for it. We built footbridges, in the highlands in Kenya to protect populations from big rainfalls, because the seasonal rainfalls were very heavy. So we did a lot of that, and that was my first introduction to like this entrepreneurship space. But for some reason decided that I wanted to go and study international relations instead. So really went and focused on politics, international relations, and looking at, okay, what is the world that we live in? How do we create policy that could really impact, the lives of, Ethiopians, Kenyans, of people on the continent. And for me, my initial thought was, okay, policy is a really good way to do this. I found myself going into more of a lobbying space. So in lobbying, what we were doing is essentially looking at legislation across the European Union and looking at where we could make improvements for the future generations. And I think here is where I got some really good insights into the entrepreneurship space, because one of the projects that I had the opportunity to work on was the European bankruptcy legislation. So as an entrepreneur, if you started a business in Europe and you went bankrupt, you were not allowed to start a business for the next 10 years. And this was a legislation that was across the EU that basically was hindering innovators and entrepreneurs from being able to innovate. And it was very stifling because the best entrepreneurs, they say, are those that try, those that try again, and those that just keep trying. So it was something that we really didn't think was necessary. So after my tenure there, we were able to get that revoked. And so now as a European founder, you're able to, even if you declare bankruptcy, you can start a business with no barriers. So I think that's fantastic. So my journey kind of started in the policy space, but I quickly realized that policy, international relations, it's just one way to be able to, change the condition of different populations, to be able to create impact, to be able to create growth on the continent as well. So I went back to school. I did my master's in innovation management and entrepreneurship. I think at this point I had a good insight into, the technologies of the future, but didn't really understand how can you manage things that the ecosystem or the country that you're in are not necessarily able to accommodate, right? So in Kenya, we can look at M-Pesa, for example. Legislation has still not caught up to M-Pesa, but M-Pesa is like the biggest player for payments in the market. So I was looking at the innovation space and how we could really, how we could use that to create, better livelihoods for different populations, access to services. And so after that started my first real venture, which was more of a consulting kind of business where I was working with European players but also local founders to be able to support them to scale their businesses in the continent, so in the region. So I worked with Bitpesa, as you said, like really looking at that kind of Bitcoin and blockchain kind of drive. And we were basically helping them look at the market, especially in Kenya and East Africa, and where they could position themselves and also what the regulatory landscape looked like. And so I've really been able to work in the forefront of innovation and like working with different startups that are trying to push the boundaries there, which has been very exciting. So after I did that, I got the opportunity to join a very early stage ed tech company. So we were building out an AI and machine learning platform that would allow people to go to learn at their own pace. And basically the algorithm would help in identifying topics that would help you get to where you wanted to be from your professional career. So that was very interesting, and I got headhunted into an early stage fund from there, so had an opportunity to work on the investment side as well, looking for early stage ventures across the continent to invest in. So I think the last year I was there, we did about 7 countries that we were looking for really early stage, more idea stage companies, and working with them and investing in them. So that was, a great experience to have. And finally, after all of that, I decided to jump ship and really just start my own venture and kind of venture out with my co-founder Alexi into the savings space. So in everything that I've been able to see and be able to learn in all of these years, something that really struck me was how people save. So in Ethiopia, for example, we have our own equivalent of a chama. So a chama is like a circle of savings. And when you look at different countries across the continent, each and every one of them have their own style of group savings. But what I saw in West Africa, so in Ghana and Nigeria, is that those processes had been digitized, whereas in Kenya, we hadn't had that yet. So we had individual savings accounts, we had payments, which had already been innovated on with M-Pesa, we had bank accounts, but they weren't necessarily penetrating the full market. But in terms of allowing people to save, and allowing them to earn higher interest on their savings, whether that's 100 shillings of savings or 100,000 shillings of savings, the barrier to entry was very high. So with KOA, we decided to introduce a mobile application that helps individuals to save their money, but on the backside we're passively investing that money for them. So whether it's a single dollar or thousands of dollars, you are still earning the same level of interest. And so that allows us to break down barriers to saving and also investing, and also provide access to the asset management industry that is a very difficult space to get into for the average retail customer. And yeah, I think I've taken you on my full journey. I don't know if you have any questions around that.
Wow, thank you so much. I mean, your journey definitely is one of great interest, from policy to innovation to investment and to KOA. And I think the whole package really prepared you for KOA, right? You mentioned that you had a venture when you were in university, and it seems like you've been really driven quite a lot by the impact you can make from a socioeconomic perspective. So if you can just expand on that a little bit for me, that would be awesome. In terms of that drive.
For sure. I think that I had the opportunity to live in, I think, 5 or 6 countries on the continent as I was growing up. And something that's very consistent is this disparity, right? Like you have a big population, a big youth population. You have people who are in urban centers able to access different types of services, whether that's a banking service, whether that's a healthcare service, whether that's a logistics service of the sort. But you don't have that across the whole country, right? So even if you look at somewhere like Ethiopia, you can look at Addis and be like, okay, there's so much advancement here, but this is a population of 160 million people, and there's not that many of them that are sitting in Addis, right? So how do you extend the innovations that the innovations you've built and you've learned in an urban center and extend those outside of those centralized the cities? So yeah, I think you could really see that in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, it's the same. It's really, how can you create technology, or how can you create a solution that actually spans an entire population and improves their livelihood? And having seen that, and it's a recurring theme anywhere I go, it's very striking. But when it comes to the technology side and how you kind of blend that, I think a lot of the solutions that have been in the market are very social oriented, right? So it's almost you get a grant and then you're creating some type of impact with that grant. But ultimately, what you see when you're working inside that policy side is that yes, grants are fantastic when innovation is being pushed, right? But when you have large institutions that are very slow to maneuver, they're not able to keep up with the technology, they don't understand what's happening on the ground, it's very difficult for them to make a big impact. So for me, I always looked at, okay, how can you create something that's more business oriented? Because I think when we look at social and economic kind of issues in a population, the solution doesn't always have to be a social impact solution, right? It can be a business solution that is not exploitative. And so I always took that angle and always tried to see, okay, how can you do this for the betterment of a specific population of people, but also not at the detriment of the company or the institution that's running it, right? Like, how can you make this self-sustaining? Because it's only when you have self-sustaining institutions you can actually make an impact, because you're not dependent on somebody funding you. You're not dependent on your cause being, top agenda line in, whichever kind of grant cycle it is. So it's also about that sustainability aspect and actually creating something that can self-sustain within an ecosystem.
That's excellent. And I love that point about being self-sustainable. And so with KOA, when you launched that, what was the uptake in terms of in the community? How fast did you grow in terms of your membership and usage of the app?
Yeah, so I think for us, we just celebrated our first year. So that was very exciting. I think with KOA, I think anyone knows that when you talk about savings, it's not the most sexy topic, it's savings is okay, I know I have to do this because it's good for me, but it is not the most fun, right? I would rather go out there and buy myself some shoes or something. So it's with KOA, what we're learning is really that patience, firstly, is like, okay, how do we create that experience of patience and delayed gratification? So when we first launched, we were like, okay, you know, people are going to take this up, people want to save, but then you realize like people want to go out on a Friday night, Saturday night, right? So how do you give people that like dopamine and that excitement for savings that they have about like going out for their favorite meal? And so even the way that we designed the app was really to create that moment of delayed gratification. So okay, I could spend this money tonight, or I can hold on to this, and like in a month's time I can get what I want. So we set up the app to be goal based, so you can come there, you set up, you know, a goal, a dream that you have. Maybe it's a new phone, maybe it's a new laptop or a new watch, and we just kind of walk the journey with you. So we send you notifications, we send you reminders. Cynthia is actually in the call now. She does the best notifications and makes people laugh all along their journey. So that's been great. So for sure, I think when you're starting any business, the uptake is always like slow, because you're learning who your target is or who your demographic is. Once you learn them and you go speak to them a bit more, then you kind of tailor things, tweak things. You're always learning and iterating. So I think we were happy with our kind of first 6 months of like a growth. And then when we got to that 6 months, we're like, okay, we need to know more about these people. And we've spent the last kind of half year really digging deeper into, okay, do we know exactly who our customers are? And for those people who are actively using KOA on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, are we able to speak to them? Can we get their feedback? And so we've gone through this whole process. And actually in the last month, we've launched like updates to our application. And so for the next 2 months, we'll be launching more and more updates based on all of our customers' feedback. So really trying to get into that position of product market fit. I think that is the place that you need to aim for when being like an early stage company, because once you can hit that product market fit, that's now when you can open the floodgates and just, you know, push on the growth side.
That's excellent. And so you definitely bring in some excitement to goals and savings, and with the investment in the background to provide interest to the consumers and learn a new market, of course, which you made some very valid points about target market. I see there's a question in the chat. I don't know, Elizabeth, do you want to pose a question?
Yes, Kimoy. So I was just curious, you know, KOA sounds like an amazing tool for, you know, people across the whole continent of Africa. And so I was just curious about the target market that you are pursuing as KOA. And have you looked at bridging into countries that have different currencies? And what's that process been like as you've been navigating an expansion? Or are you there yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now we're live in Kenya. So Kenya is our kind of primary market. Kenya is a great testing ground for us. Kenya has the highest uptake when it comes to like new applications and new services when they are mobile based. The Kenyan demographic just seems to be so open to new services. So that's been fantastic for us. Of course, when we're looking at, you know, newer markets, we're looking for markets that are similar in demographic, kind of like in demographics to the Kenyan market, so skewed a bit younger, people who are in that middle to young age, so people who are just graduating university, going into their first, second, or third job. KOA kind of fits in very nicely there. It's those people who are coming to this point where they first have some disposable income, they're making their first financial decisions outside of, you know, university and setting themselves up for the long term. So we look for populations that have, you know, a big kind of middle ground there. I think when it comes to different currencies and other African countries, as we've been doing a lot of learning on our customer, we've also been doing a lot of learning on the business model, the regulatory side, and also, of course, on the asset management side, because where we sit in the whole ecosystem is this kind of tech enabler that sits between regulation, that sits between asset managers, that sits between the customer, right? So we're bringing all of these parties together. And I think now we've been able to set up a structure that really allows us to optimize and provide like an experience for our customers that is, better than what's in the market, but also tap into asset managers so that they can also, be competitive with us on the platform and offer their services. So when it comes to different markets, we'd also be looking at a market that's favorable from a licensing perspective that would allow us to come in to set up shop and also not have a long lead time before we could be live in the market, and also probably look for a market that one of our partners is already in, because then that becomes a very easy, a quick time to launch for us.
I was just asking, like, as a potential customer for this application, like, what could be some of the other benefits that I get other than saving, and how is it different from saving my money with the bank? Or maybe on M-Pesa, we have the M-Shwari, which is also a saving platform. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. So firstly, banks have a ceiling in terms of how much interest they can offer, right? So when you're looking at a bank, you're looking at a maximum interest rate between 5 and 6%, and that's just dictated by the central bank. At KOA, we're not investing in banks, we're investing with asset managers who have a ceiling of about 15%. So on average for us, the return is between 8 and 10% per annum on your interest that gets compounded daily. So your money works a little harder for you in KOA than it does at the bank. When it comes to M-Shwari, for us, we really are focused on the customer experience. So if you look at our mobile app, you'll see that it's very user-friendly. We focus on educating our customers, so making sure that you understand what an investment is, you understand what interest is, you understand, all these terms that are being thrown around, to make sure that you are well educated and can make choices, for yourself and build like a really good base for your financial future. We also make sure that we are kind of with you on that journey. So for me, for example, I struggle with saving towards things. I'll always say, okay, I'll save towards this. In the back of my mind, it's there, but I always forget to put the money aside. So like on KOA, for example, we have triggers. So you get a notification. If I decide to save every week, I'll get a notification every week to say, hey, it's time to deposit towards your goal. So making sure that I'm being like held accountable. So KOA is there kind of walking the journey with you.
Just a question for you then. So you mentioned that you take the funds and then you invest them through, some asset management companies, etc. Is this also like traded through like stocks or mutual funds on a global market?
No, not at the moment. So we keep things local.
Right.
So just because of regulation and all of that, we make sure that the investments are local. We work with regulated asset managers who are regulated by the Capital Markets Authority, and they are the ones who kind of have the expertise in investing. We work with them to make sure that we get the return to our customers. So right now we have been working with 2 different asset managers, specifically on the money market fund. So the money market fund is a lower risk product that allows customers to pull out their funds I guess more often than you would if you put something into a fixed deposit type of account. So your funds are readily available to you. So we don't put too much distance between you and your money, because I know money is very personal. We can't be the barrier between you and your fund. So we try to keep it as much as possible that the funds are very liquid and that you can access them, but still in Kenya, for example, beating inflation. Our inflation is about 6.4% right now, I think even higher. So, at an 8%, 8 to 10%, you're beating inflation and, getting some returns. So that's very positive.
And just a question for you then. If you were to give 3 to 5 tips to any budding or existing entrepreneurs entering like a fintech space such as this, what would that be?
Yeah, I think for me, if you ask anyone in the company, there's two things that I always say is like, one, if there's no process, then it's very hard to do anything, right? Like if you're building a business is running processes recurringly and improving those processes over time. So especially from an operational side, when you're starting out, operations really becomes, the core of what you're doing, operations and product, especially for a fintech product. And so you need to have your processes documented, you need to have them outlined, and you need to foolproof them, right? You need to think, okay, if I am not here tomorrow, can somebody come in and pick up this process without needing to talk to me? And if your documents allow you to do that, then I think you're in a great place. The second thing is timekeeping. I always tell my team, if you're on time, you are late, right? I think that speaks like broadly, that speaks more to like, the professionalism. It also speaks to, you and upholding standards, because if you are the entrepreneur, if you're the one starting the business, you set the tone for everyone else. How you show up to meetings, how prepared you are, what time you show up, when you show up, what you say, how you do, it all filters down into how people are going to behave when they come and work for you. So it's a big kind of, it could seem a bit like a burden, but it also is like, how do you want your team to interact with you? How do you want to show up for your team? And just do your best to uphold that. Of course, people are not perfect. I'm not always on time, but I do my best. And, and my team feels free to hold me accountable to that as well. If I'm late, they're like, excuse me, you're late. So I think if you can create that and have discipline in yourself, and I think maybe like something that I would have hoped somebody could have told me is, that what's it called? The journey has so many ups and it has so many downs, right? And you can get to the point where your business is everything, right? You're getting this thing off the ground. It's your child, it's your baby. You put everything into it, and all of a sudden it's not going as well as you wanted to, or the goals that you set are not, they're not goaling as much as you want them to. They're just not getting there. and sometimes it feels like, okay, that you people tend to take that internally and say like, but I am failing, I am the one who's not able to do this, I am not capable. But I think something that I've really had to learn is, how do you create distance between your ability and your I guess like worth as an individual and the performance of the company, right? Because those are two completely different things. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, you group everything together and all of a sudden you have failed, and it's very easy to get to that conclusion. And so I think it's very important that as you start your entrepreneurship journey, you can create two entities, which is yourself and the business, and they are two separate things. And as long as you can keep that in mind, then I think you'll be good.
The person is asking, who can have access to this? Is this international, and how can students and youths benefit from these, and how flexible is this?
Nice. So yes, the KOA is only available in Kenya at the moment. As long as you have an ID card and are using mobile money for the moment, then you're able to utilize the application. I have been hearing about saving. Yeah, so it's a savings platform. And essentially, once you download it, you can set up your account and get to saving after setting up a goal.